It's your boy Pop Pop. You have to stick with me because the internet is a little bit sketchy. She is sketchy today. So it's early in the morning and I'm just wiping the sleep out of my eyes. It's June 1st. June is Pride. And one of you all sent me a text message asking me if I had anything funny to relate that would be relative to Pride Month. And as a matter of fact, yes, I do. So, when I was a when I was a young boy, hey, thank you. How are you? When I was a young kid, 14 years old, I went to school and then I worked full time at a gas station under very difficult circumstances with much older men. And I made $9 a day, not $9 an hour. I made $9 a day, and there were men that were raising families on that kind of money back then. Premium gas was 26 cents a gallon for premium. So a man across the street picked up the garbage at the hotel and he offered me $20 a day if I would work for him. So I jumped right on board, not thinking, well, why doesn't he have a helper now? He's been in business a while. Why wouldn't he already have somebody? So I hopped on board at $20 a day and found out that it was work from dark in the morning till dark at night. And he would beat the ever-loving crap out of me if I didn't pick up the garbage fast enough or if I didn't pick up enough. So we had these huge barrels. We had these huge barrels that you had to carry on your back. 120-gallon barrels held 200 or so pounds of trash. And so when we got to an apartment and the trash was always in the basement, and back then they threw away everything, phone books, all kinds of stuff. It all went in the trash and it was heavy. So when we got to an apartment, I would run down the basement stairs with my barrel, and the barrel was actually bigger than me at that time. So the reflection, it looked like the barrel was going downstairs by itself. I would go into the trash room and I would take all the cans and tip them real fast before the driver got there. And I would dump all of the cans that had light trash in my barrel, and I'd be coming up the stairs at the time my driver was going down. And so one day he figured out what I was doing. He said, how come every other can has got refuse in it? I know what you're doing. You're putting the light cans for you and leaving the heavy for me. And he picked me up like a rag doll and threw me against the trash room door. Bam! And beat the crap out of me. And this woman came in and she said, what the H is going on here? And I told her, I said, ma'am, I'm sorry. I dropped my barrel and it banged the door. I'm very sorry. You know, I didn't rat out my driver because I had no place to go, and he would have KILLED'd me. So I got the idea to get an upscale garbage man job driving one of those trucks with the forks where you just pick up the can and dump it, back out and you're good to go. So I went into this yard, and the boss was one of those men that were in Project Broken Arrow in the 50s, where they exploded a BOMB out in the desert. And then they had the men march into the radiation with their GUNS like that was going to do something. They wanted to see if they could run men into WAR after an NUKE. I'm sorry for this platform, but there are certain words you can't use. So 30 years later, he got cancer. And I mean, he absolutely started to fall apart. He looked like the lizard man off of that Starship Troopers, or that movie where the guy's playing the video game in the trailer park, and the lizard man recruits him. Galaxy Troopers or whatever. Cheesy movie, but very entertaining. So I go to work for this guy, and he was like Telly Savalas. He always had a lollipop in his mouth, not a lick of hair on his head from cancer. And he always said, "Hey, baby. Hey, baby." I would say, "Well, what about this? What about, hey, baby, you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out, baby." So, in any case, I got the most beat up truck of the fleet, which was a cab over Kenwood with the fiberglass cab that was all busted up. So you're sitting over top of the motor, and to close the doors, I had a chain, and I would reach over and I would put the chain on the door for the passenger side. I'd put the chain across my lap and hook it to the driver's door to keep the doors from opening up. Can you imagine how dangerous that was if something had happened and I'm hooked into the cab with the chain? And the cab rocked because the fiberglass was all broken, and it was just sitting over top of the motor, practically unhooked except for the back lock on the cab. So I found out why that's important, because one day I was in the yard, and we parked at an Amoco station, which I later destroyed with the truck. Knocked the gas station totally flat. It's Rockville Medical Center now, courtesy of me and my garbage truck. And so after I was filling the truck up, and the parking brake let loose, my boss said, and it flattened the Amoco, my boss said, "Hey, baby, get in your truck, adjust the brakes, and go pull your route." Now, I didn't know how to adjust brakes. He didn't tell me. But I got under the truck with the wrench and tightened the brakes up, and they worked just fine. I tightened them up the way you tighten them up on a car back when I worked at the Esso station. So I applied the same logic, got in the truck, drove off. When I came back that afternoon, they had put up all of this plywood to prop up the rest of the gas station to keep it from collapsing. and then later on they knocked it down for safety's sake. But so the the truck was sitting there, and they were getting a load of gasoline for the gas station, and the fumes wafted over to the diesel, and my truck was like, I like that. And it was sitting there idling, and the motor started to idle faster and faster and faster. And then it threw the governor. The governor is this little thing with two little balls that spins around, and it threw that part off, and then the motor went critical, and it's just sitting there screaming. And you never want to drive a diesel truck without a fuel cutoff, because the engine will run as long as there's fuel, and if there's not enough fuel, it'll take the oil out of the pan and it'll suck that up and run off of it before it blows up and blows piston, 60 feet up into the air. You don't want to be sitting in the cab when that happens. So, in any case, I used to wear these really short cutoffs because of all of the engine heat that came into the cab. The shorts were so short that the pockets showed through the legs. The pockets hung down further than the legs, which I had cut off the shorts, off the jeans. So I wore them with a WB that was that cheese grater cloth, a cheesecloth WB, and my paps looked like two gerbils with their noses sticking out of the shirt. I'm not going to go into it. This is adult conversation, but if you don't get it, you don't get it. Sorry. So, in any case, I'm driving along and it's hot as heck. And I stop at the truck stop store, and I get a package of new gloves, and they had these bandanas that were all kind of different colors, like red and yellow and green and blue. And you got a package of gloves and two bandanas, to soak up the sweat so it doesn't get in your eyes and burn your eyes. And in any case, I leave the store. I take my little yellow bandana and I tie it around my head to keep the sweat from getting in my eyes. And I look straight up cholo with my shades on, my bandana, my cheesecloth shirt, my Daisy Dukes, and my construction boots. I looked like something out of Playgirl. So, because I was buff back then. I was beefy, man. I had big old guns on me, and a Cobra back. I was buff back then from lifting trash, and I used to like to go to the gym and lift weights after picking up trash all day. Go figure. This was over a half a century ago. So in any case, it's hot as heck out and I'm hungry. And they had a restaurant in the area, and euphemistically, the locals used to call this restaurant Woody's. So figure that out. So, not wanting to look too rough, I decided to get cleaned up before I ordered my food. And I took the bandana off, fluffed my hair around so I didn't look like that Unibomber guy, that lived in a shack in the woods I straightened my hair up, you know, tried to get cleaned up so I didn't knock everybody in the restaurant down with the smell. Parked the truck in the back lot and went into the bathroom to clean up before ordering my food, or I think I ordered it. Yeah, I ordered it, and then I decided to wash up while they were making my food. And you got a sub or an overstuffed sandwich, fries, and a Coke. I think it was $4.99, something like that. It was a really good deal. But again, this was over a half a century ago. Everything was cheap back then. So I take the bandana off, yellow bandana, and I put it in my back pocket. And I go in to wash up, and there are all these men standing along the wall. I would say that the men's room had myself, and I looked at the stalls, and this is so stupid. There were 4 legs under the bathroom stall. So back then, I was very innocent, and I thought, well, the guy must be a centaur. One of those guys with 2 sets of legs. I figured, well, there's a centaur in the bathroom stall using the toilet. So I didn't know how things worked back then. I was raised in a very strict home where you were allowed to smoke, you were allowed to drink coffee, but if you drank alcohol or cursed, my father would beat you to DEATH, and he meant it. When I was 11, he sucker punched me in the face and knocked me down the basement stairs. And then he came down and stood over me and beat me like we were in a bar fight. He beat me so bad he had to have oxygen when he went back upstairs. And I didn't get up for about 20 minutes after that beat down. My parents never checked to see if I was okay or whether I needed to go to the hospital or anything. So in any case, I'm kind of wary, about going into the bathroom and there's a bunch of guys in the bathroom, because when I was 9, our school went on a trip to Washington to see this terrible movie called The Immigrants. And it was about people coming to America and they're on this ship during a storm. And I went into the men's room, and there were 6 brothers in there who relieved me of my money. And then as I was getting ready to go out of the bathroom, the guy grabbed my hand and shook it. But that's another story in and of itself. So I walk up to the urinal and, undo my Daisy Dukes so I can relieve myself. And the guy next to me turns to me, and when he turns to me, he piddles on my leg. And I turned back to him. I said, WTH, man, what the heck you doing? And he said, well, you got the bandana in your back pocket. So? He's like, stupid, you got a yellow bandana in your back pocket. That means you're a taker. Taker? I didn't take anything. It means you like to get peed on, stupid. And so, of all the consequences, I go into a men's room in a bar where the men are hooking up. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew, like I said, euphemistically, that the bar was nicknamed Woody's. And so All I wanted was something to eat and to have a soda or two and to hit the road, get back to work, get my route done so I could, you know, get off and get someplace and cool down. But he cooled me down. He peed all over my leg. So I'm standing there arguing with this guy about him peeing on me. And I got his piddle running into my sock in my boot. And like I said, it's like 90 degrees out. And I got to finish my route. And all of the other guys, they thought that it was funny as smack. And plus, you know, I'm not going to wear my bandana anymore now that I knew what it meant if you put it in your back pocket. I think I did when I went out to the truck. I put the bandana on because I didn't want sweat in my eyes while I'm driving my truck. So, in any case, I, you know, I left the men's room, went and got my lunch. Everybody by that time and found out what had happened to me, you know, whispering as I, you know, went into the dining room to get my lunch. And the lady gave me this look like she was trying not to laugh. And she said, "Would you like anything else with that?" And so I looked at her very sternly and I said, "No, I've had quite enough, thank you." And I never went back. I never went back to that place after that. The sandwich was fantastic. The fries were perfectly salted and crispy and gooey on the inside, and the soda pop was ice cold. I guess it all tasted better because I had had so many times when I was young when I didn't have anything to eat and all of that other stuff, that when I had a chance to eat, it just tasted so much better. But y'all asked me if I had a story that was appropriate for Pride Month. And that's my story of going into the restaurant and getting peed on. And no, I didn't punch the guy or anything like that because there were other guys there and it was my fault for being stupid. But just the odds of having picked out a red bandana and a yellow bandana at the truck stop along with my gloves and taking the bandana off and putting it in my back pocket, you know, so it would air out and the sweat would evaporate. I guess I figured. I was very logical back then, even for a young garbage man. I always in life did everything with a purpose. But it amazes me how quickly time goes by. It was like all of that stuff happened yesterday, and bringing everything back to remembrance of how tough the times were for a young boy. And like I said, I drove the truck by the grace of God for 5 or 6 months because I was underage, and my boss, he never asked to see my driver's license. They never entered it into the company record. It was very different back then. Companies didn't even have to file maintenance records with DOT or any of that stuff back then. The only time that a record got filed was if you had an accident, and all of the other men in the company had accidents except me. I always drove the line, but I never went over what the truck could handle or anything like that. And I always took care of my own truck, changing the oil on it and doing the brakes and keeping the tires filled up, which almost cost me a hand one day because back then you had 3-piece rims on trucks. You didn't have buddy wheels like you have now. And so you took the tire and you repaired it, and then you patched the inner tube and you tucked it into the tire, and then you pushed the tire down on a half rim, and then there was a ring. There was a ring that had to be absolutely perfect, and you put that, snap that on, and aired the tire up. Well, our trucks and everything were so old that the ring looked like a snake, where it started at this end, it ended at that end. It was supposed to be even, but it was so bent, it was like that far off. And so I decided to take a sledgehammer and beat the ring onto the tire before I aired it up. But what I didn't know was I beat the ring on the tire backwards, convex instead of concave. So essentially, when I put that 120 pounds of air in that tire, I had a rolling BOMB on my hands. And when I rolled the tire out towards the truck and people in the yard saw it, they all started to scatter because they knew that the second that ring blew off of that tire, that it could literally decapitate anybody that it hit. So my boss said, "Hey, baby, you take that tire and you lean it up against a wall and you let the air out of the valve and you pray to God that it doesn't take your hand off before all of the air comes out." And that's what I did. I rolled the tire back to the side of the Amoco station, praying the whole time. And I reached through like I was diffusing a BOMB and undid the tire valve and just waited for all the air to rush out. I believe that God did look over me with angels because of all of the stuff that happened on the truck. The equipment was very beat up. And one of the premier drivers quit because he found a job with a concrete company driving a much safer truck at much better salary. So I got his truck with a manual transmission, a 7-speed with a split axle rear end. So essentially it had 14 gears you could get. And it went first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh was up and in the middle. I couldn't get that through my mind that 7th gear was straight up in the middle. So I would go first, second, third, 7th, and the transmission would grind, and I would try and slam it into 7th gear when the truck was going too slow. And I would go, and there was no map on the console that told you which gears were where. All I knew was that this one gear wouldn't go in, so I would stand up in the cab and jam it into 7, and then the truck would buck and everything, and I would go down the road bucking the truck and riding the clutch a little bit to smooth things out. So eventually I wore the gears down so bad that the gears in the transmission dropped down on each other. And the transmission made this horrible, shrill whine like it was being tortured, as indeed it was. So my truck had to go down to Washington to have a complete transmission and clutch and everything put into it. And it had to go down to 7th Street in Washington. And so, hey Sandy, how are you? So, in any case, the boss, I gotta go in a few minutes, but the boss told me to go down to 7th Street and pay the bill for the truck. And we were all given free gas with this company as part of our salary. And I'm sure the boss wrote it off on his taxes. And he claimed that the gas was going into the trucks because he gave all of the drivers free gas. So all of us turned around and bought larger cars. And so, in any case, my buddy went from a 6-cylinder Firebird to a Cadillac Eldorado, and not wanting to be outdone, I called my old buddy Chuck Barnes, the car guy, and asked him if he had a good used car for me. And Chuck always came through. I bought a lot of cars from him. Gave my sister-in-law a Chrysler New Yorker. Gave a lady at church a Olds Cutlass. Bought myself a Olds Tornado, which was massive. And the boss comes in. All of the cars are huge and massive, and we're all getting free gas. So I drive down to Washington in my Olds Tornado. It was beautiful. It was silky white with a padded white top and a red leather interior. It really looked like a pimp mobile back then because the gas crisis had hit and most everybody was dumping big cars, and they were driving little Toyotas and Datsun B210s and these little what my boss called SHIT boxes. And so I drive down to Washington, and I had the air conditioning on in the Toro, and I had the windows cracked. I always liked a little bit of fresh air. And in any case, I get into a real bad neighborhood, and I'm driving along, and a hooker comes up to the car, and I'm sitting at the traffic light, and she put her fingers in the window, holding on to the window because she was high, I guess, weaving back and forth. And she gonna ask me if I want a little something, if I want to catch a disease. And I didn't notice her, and the light turned green, and I stomped on the gas and took off, and I looked in the rearview mirror, and the lady is sitting on the ground where she got thrown off the car, and I wasn't going back. I'm sorry. Like I said, this was over half a century ago, early 1970s. And I go down to the shop, and the truck is sitting out in the middle of the air. And there are these ramps. Sitting in the middle of the air, going nowhere, so the men could work underneath the truck. And so to get my truck, I had to walk on the ramp, step over step that way, looking down into nothing, but this pit that's 15 feet below. And I had to climb up, get the truck, back it out by myself, and make sure that I didn't fall off the ramps and drive the truck down into the pit with me in it. So, in any case, I backed the truck out and I want to inspect it, and the bumper's like a V, where they had chained up the front of the truck and pulled the truck up by its bumper, and the bumper collapsed and it was like the shape of a V instead of being flat. And so I beefed at the guy. I said, WTH my bumper, man. And he said, well, are you sure you didn't hit something like, he got smart with me. He said, you sure that you didn't hit something like a telephone pole or a fire plug on your way down? I said, no, man. And I'll tell you what, I'll give you your money. I'll give you your check. You take that bumper off and you flatten it out and put it back on the truck. We'll be good to go. I won't have anything else to say. So the truck not being ready really made me angry. And I get back in the Toro. I go to start it up. And it wouldn't quite start right. So in any case, I really punished it when I got it to start. I didn't realize that the engine was overheated and it had vapor lock. So it finally started. I turned on the air conditioner, which was the worst thing that you could do on a 90-degree day when your motor's overheated. And I'm driving out of Washington, and all of a sudden, every light on the dash and gauge went to critical, like a nuclear power plant. When you see all the emergency lights start flashing and it goes dee-doo, 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 dee-doo. The oil light came on. The light said generator. It had an alternator on it, but the dash said generator and overheat and all of this. You know, every single stinking light came on the car. You know, water and fuel, just everything that could light up lit up. And what had happened was I had thrown a belt, and the car wasn't cooling itself because the belt was either slipping or had come off or something. And I'm in the worst part of DC that you could be in. So I'm coming out of DC and the radiators start to hiss and everything. And somebody takes a shopping cart and they're letting me know that I don't belong in the neighborhood. And they push the shopping cart in front of the car, and the car hits it and just knocks it like a fly out of the way. Just bats the shopping cart. But that was the locals' way of telling me that I didn't belong in that neighborhood. So in any case, I'm like, I'm not stopping for any lights. I'm not stopping for nothing. And so the car starts womp-womping. You step on the gas and it goes womp, 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 womp. And the motor's popping and knocking and hissing and everything. And I turn the air conditioner off and I crack the windows a little further down because I'm not going through this neighborhood with the windows down and no GUN in the car or any way of protecting myself. And I told the car, my sister-in-law named the car Christine because it was so mean. And I told the car, I said, baby, I'm not stopping. I said, your motor can lock up or blow up or whatever. I ain't stopping. And so I'm coming from DC up into Eastern Avenue, you know, by the Roy Rogers. And the car's like, womp, 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 womp. And I pulled into the Roy Rogers on Eastern Avenue far enough into a safer area where I can raise the hood up. and the car is a psh, like that. And so I turned the engine off and got the hood open. And there's an apartment complex behind the Roy Rogers. A man sleeping in the dumpster who crawls out because it was still early morning. And this guy, what he would do, he would eat some of the food that Roy Rogers would throw out. Then he would put some cardboard down and sleep in the dumpster on the heat of the garbage. So I'm looking at the car and this guy crawls out of the dumpster. I see two legs come out of the dumpster. And then he kind of holds on to the top and puts his feet on the ground and gets out of the dumpster. He didn't have to tell me what the deal was. I'd been homeless enough myself to know what the deal was. And he kind of wanders over and he's like, you know, car's overheated, man. I'm like, yeah, and I ain't got no money. I'm sorry. No problem. So I'm there kind of angry at the car, and I decide to try and start it back up again. And I put the key in and I turn it and it goes, rum, 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 rum. So I had a hand walkie-talkie back then. They didn't have cell phones per se back then. They had these huge, like Motorola Army-looking cell phones back then that must have weighed like 10 pounds, literally. But I had a company walkie-talkie. So I had them come and rescue me. And the engine cooled down. And they put water in the radiator. And I started it up. And that thing went, whoa, whoa, dock, 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 dock. And the car would just shake. It was like somebody pushing on the side of the car. And so you would give it gas and it would go like that. So in any case, I took the car to a local buddy, and he put a gas engine in it. This little, like, Chevy 307 gas engine. And he didn't drain the diesel out of the tank. So instead of draining the diesel out of a half tank of diesel, they just put gas on top of the diesel. And the gas engine didn't like that. And I started up, it went, so I thought I got a bad engine. But man, I left some smoke. Every place I went, man, I smoked it out until that diesel got out of the tank. And then after that, it was a pretty good car. It was a pretty good car with the junk engine in it. And it was super cheap. I think it was like $500 to put the engine in for me. This Jim's truck stop in Rockville. And the guy was a bud. And when he was working on the diesel one time, I had gotten water in the fuel. So he had to put a new injector pump in it. Water in a diesel motor will kill the injector pump because as the pump spins around, the water emulsifies the fuel and the pump will destroy itself very quickly. So he put a new injector in it when it was a diesel, and he started it up and the motor went Wah! Like that. It just went berserk because it was getting too much fuel and too much air. And Jim took a rag and he tied this rag around his hand and he put over the inlet, and it terrified me. I thought the motor was going to suck his hand right into the motor. and it sucked that rag and everything that he could put over top of that inlet to choke the motor. And then Christine just went boom, 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 boom for the longest time until he could get that motor shut down. He wasn't the brightest mechanic or the best, but he was cheap. And in my book, cheap was good. But in any case, when he put the new motor in, it worked fine. The air conditioning didn't work after that, but I didn't care at that point because the car was so ragged out. But the guys had borrowed it and put truck tires in the trunk and everything. I'd be driving my truck and I would see my car go down the road with two hillbillies in it and this great big truck tire in the back and the trunk lid banging up and down on the truck tire. They used it like a pickup truck. And so the red leather had grease and everything all over it. I don't remember what happened to the car after that, but I bought a Ford Galaxy or LTD after that, which is another story in and of itself. But fam, I gotta go. I wish you all a good month. If you go to a parade, and you're enjoying yourself in the sun and all that other stuff, that's fine, fam. But if you go to a parade and they're mocking God, I wouldn't stick around because there's no reason. There's no reason if you're someplace and they're making fun of the very God that's given you the breath in your body, on top of all the freedoms that we're enjoying in this country. Freedom to laugh, to love the one that you want to love. You know, look at the rest of the world. The way the rest of the world is getting BOMBED every place. Israel, you know, the Middle East, you know, in the bear country, China and the other country, they're getting ready to go at it. We are so blessed in this country compared to everybody else. Just enjoy that, fam. And thank God for it every day. Pop out.